about it. If I can get my computer to agree. So why are we here? My mom's blog gets more hits than your mom's blog. This is not an uncommon situation. There are a lot of parents who are blogging. Does parenting make us better bloggers? Well, we will never have this problem. I'm looking out the window waiting for something to blog. Right? This doesn't happen to parents. And does blogging make us better parents? Well, we will also never have this problem. Your mother and I found out you've been blogging. We don't know what that means, but we'd like you to stop. Kids get ahead of parents in technology, right? It's like moving to a new country. The kids pick up the language faster than the parents, and the parents always speak with a little bit of an accent, no matter how long we've been here, right? And it's the same with technology, is that our kids will be faster adapters than we are. But we will be ahead of the curve of most of our peers. And our kids will probably adapt faster once they're adults. There'll be things that they're more comfortable with. But we can guide our kids in technology longer because of the experiences that we have with social media, with technology, with blogging, with all this stuff. So, does it matter? Here is an infogram. I'm sorry to leave the dads out, but modern mothers. So there are about, well, almost 4 million mom bloggers, and this is from about 2009, right? So arguably more now. About 500 of those are considered to have power and reach, but we're just talking about your family. You have power and reach as a parent, right? I thought this was kind of interesting. That's about 14% of all moms, American moms, are mommy bloggers. And interestingly, this doesn't include the dads, which I think is peaking a little bit later, but is certainly really, really a new upcoming issue. So what did I promise to talk about today? I promised to talk about boundaries. I promised to talk about building resilient kids. And I promised to talk about creating kids who understand responsibility. That might seem like a lot to put on parents who blog in particular, but the truth is we're really well suited to teach each of these 3 ideas to our kids. Hey, please interrupt me with questions if you'd like to. And I mentioned for people who are live streaming, I promise to watch my Twitter feed in case you have questions, so I will absolutely do that. So we're going to talk about boundaries. As a blogger, we need boundaries, right? If we're going to balance all the other things that we do, and it's really not just about blogging, it's about our online life. Our kids don't know if we're blogging or checking email from work or what any of the million things we might be doing, right? But as an online presence, an online persona, we have to put boundaries around our time. We just listened in this room to the social office and someone saying, from the employer's point of view, what's great about having a social office is that you're going to have access to your employees, if not 24/7, at least from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. Well, it is easy once you've got an online connection to your work, no matter what your work is, to feel like you owe that. But to what do we owe our kids? What do we owe our kids, and to whom at home do we also owe our time and things like that? What about to ourselves? Do you take your phone with you to exercise? Do you take your phone with you to the bathroom? Do you sit with your phone next to you at meals? Right? How obligated are we to be connected? If we want to teach our kids boundaries, if we don't want to, when we have teenagers, only see the top of their heads and never their eyes, we have to model some boundaries for them too. This isn't to say that we're not more accessible now than we were a generation ago. I get that. I like it to some extent, right? It's kind of nice to know that it's not going to be a total onslaught Monday morning, that I can kind of keep pace with things as they come up. But my kids need to know that there are times, my husband needs to know that there are times that belong to them. If my priority is my family, and I say that it is, I need to prove it with what I do. So from my point of view, it's not about how many hours you put, it's about decision-making, being intentional. Saying, okay, the time that I'm actually working, head in the game, planning, creating, all those things are this hour to this hour. And in today's life, it might be this hour to this hour, and then break, and then this hour to this hour, break for a family thing, break for exercise, break for whatever. It's nice to have that flexibility, but these are my hours, my office hours. These are the hours I'm on, right? Then I might have my availability hours, and those might be larger. Listen, I'm a family doctor. I am on call 1 week out of every 2. That is 24/7 availability. But boy, those weeks that I'm not on call, I try and touch my phone a lot less. My kids know when that ring goes that shows I have a text specifically from my answering service, they'll bring it to me even if I'm in the bathroom, right? They know that that means there's a patient who needs me. But I keep that ringtone separate from all my other ringtones so that I and they know why I'm answering the phone during bedtime, right? During story time, things like that. Right? So our time needs some boundaries. Our space needs some boundaries. And this is really helpful as parents in particular. When kids are first born, they come out feeling very much like, especially for their mom, that their mom's body is an extension of their body. Right? And it takes developmentally about 4 years for them to figure out that that is not the case. These lips are not their lips, right? My hair is not theirs to tug. All that kind of stuff. Now we teach them, it doesn't mean we should wait until they're 4 to say, ow, don't do that. But it is really important to understand boundaries for them, and it is really hard. It is not at all intuitive to them if they can look at the book you're reading or touch the remote control and stuff like that, that they can't play with your phone, for example. As a matter of fact, maybe they do play with your phone. And if that's okay with you, that's great. For me, it's not okay because, like I said, I'm on call for my practice, and I can't miss a page that somebody has chest pain, right? So if my son, as one of my kids did once, accidentally turns off my ringer and I don't realize it, I luckily that time did not, but I could miss a really life-threatening situation. So I have some spaces. But also, when can they have me? When is it okay to get my attention, right? So if I can have a space in my home that's my workspace, ideally a room with a door, right? Because then you can close the door, come on in. You can post, this is parent blog.
Okay, I'm gonna move on.
That's okay. If you have a room with a door that you can close, great. That's a really physical boundary, right? You can post your office hours on it, all good. But that's not common. So maybe it's a corner of your kitchen, or maybe it's a corner of your living room, or your bedroom, or your family room, or whatever it is. But as long as you let your family know, when I'm sitting there, anybody old enough to have watched WKRP in Cincinnati, right? He taped the walls on the floor, put tape on and somebody crossed over the wall, he'd be like, did you walk through a wall? You have to go through the door and knock. You know, there were no walls, there was no door. But he created this blueprint on the ground to give people boundaries because he just needed some space so badly. I don't think that would work with my 4 boys, but you give them the idea. You see my tush in that chair, you have to wait, figure out if I'm on the phone, touch me, ask me quietly. Maybe you can't talk to me while I'm sitting in that chair. You need to text me or do something different like you would if I was at an office. Whatever makes sense to you. But having that boundary tells them when they can't talk to you, but even better, it tells them when they can talk to you. They don't always have to wonder, are you off limits to me now? You're always on the phone. And we are, man. To our kids' credit, like we are always on the phone. We can be on the phone in the car. We used to have our parents' attention in the car, unless there was a horrible thing happening, right? We used to have our parents' attention a lot of the time. Now, especially with Bluetooth, they never know. You could be talking to them, you could be talking to somebody else. Who knows what's going on, right? So having those space boundaries helps us and helps them. And then lastly, we really want to have accessibility boundaries, right? So when you are working, how may they contact you? You might feel they can call you anytime they want. It might not surprise you to know that when my husband, who's an emergency medicine doctor, is working, the boys can't call him without asking my permission, right? They certainly may not call his cell phone. Our eldest son, we've given him permission to call the nurse's station because the nurses know if he's sitting there or if he's busy and say, this is Deborah Gilboa, may I speak to my dad? And the nurses know, right? Like, and they know that his kids aren't that old, and it's a boundary, right? It's like a layer. For me, my kids can always call me at my work number because it's at my desk. And if I'm at my desk, I'm by definition not in a room seeing a patient. If it goes to my voicemail, it goes to my voicemail, right? But they may not call me on my cell phone while I'm working either because I could be in a room with a patient. And if I see my home number go off, somebody better be bleeding because I'll answer it, but they better be bleeding. And so that's what I mean about accessibility boundaries. If you or one of your brothers is in danger and you can't find the grown-up who's in the house with you or something like that, you may call me. Absolutely, there's a fire. You may call me. If it is not a fire or its emotional equivalent, you'd best not interrupt me or you're going to get in trouble. However, they know my work hours because we wrote them down on the fridge at home. If I'm in what my husband calls my office, which is the coffee house where I go to get some of my online work done, they can call me on my cell phone anytime they like. That's a boundary that I have opened for them, right? I've said that's okay. That might not be okay with you. It just depends. There's no rules about what the boundary should be. I'm up here suggesting we have them. That's all, right? And then we have to have boundaries as a parent. So as a parent who does online work, what do you guys think is the biggest problem from our family's point of view about the work that we're doing online that isn't time-space accessibility? What did they want us to have boundaries about?
Their privacy.
Their privacy, right? I actually, when I knew I was going to speak here, I put something on Facebook and Twitter and everything, and I elicited all these parents that I know who do online work, and they were all like, posts and pictures, right? Topics. The point is, can your family be topic for your online fodder? You know, joking aside, right, that cartoon about the guy who's staring out the window waiting for something to blog. Most of the interesting things that blog happen, I have to admit, within the walls of my home. And so, is that okay? I was really excited to be invited to blog for the Huffington Post. You're going to be a parenting blogger for the Huffington Post. Would you please send us an audition piece? And the editor sent me a private note that was like, you know, I really like your work, but your work is pretty responsible. We'd like something a little edgier. And I was like, oh, what am I going to write? What am I going to write? And then our 9-year-old interrupted my husband and I at an intimate moment. And I thought, this is perfect! So I sat down and I wrote this entire post about what to do if you get caught in bed by your kid. And I read it to my husband and I was like, do you mind if I put this up? He's like, no, but I'm not the one you have to ask. And I went, whoa, totally right. Dang it. So I sat down with my 9-year-old and I said to him, hey, you remember the other night when you knocked on the door? And I said, I'd be out in a second. I came to your room and you asked me what we'd been doing. And I told you what we'd been doing because that was the thing, right? That was the hook for my post because I told him the truth. And he was like, yeah. And I said, I'd like to write about that for an online newspaper. And he said, what? And I said, well, you know, I think that parents need to hear this story. And I've been asked to write for them anyway. But to be totally honest, some people we know and know you will probably read it. I'm not going to use your name, but they're going to guess who it was probably, some people that you know. And he said, why do you think they should know? And I said, oh, good question. I think they should know because I think most parents in that situation lie to their kids because they're embarrassed. And I think that it would be better, not just for the parents, but for the kids, if they actually considered telling them the truth, which in our cultural lexicon, I didn't say that to him, is not what you usually do in that moment, right? You say, I was having an asthma attack. It was the television. Daddy was helping me look for a quarter. Like, you know, you say something totally ridiculous, and then the kid learns shame and embarrassment and knows you're lying, but doesn't know why. And like, it's, you know, and my son said, well, then you better write it because parents don't know half the problems they start when they lie to their kids. And that's just kind of his own maturity and things he's observed in life, which I hesitate to ask what. But I said, thank you. And then I went back and I changed my post to say, at the end, if you know my child and you run into him, please don't mention this. If you do, send us an extra $20 for the therapy fund. Right? So topics matter. And when I asked on Facebook, I said, do you ask permission from the people in your life before you blog about them? And some people said, no, I just would never say anything that I wouldn't say in public. And some people said, yes, absolutely. My husband reads my blog, so I would never get away with it, basically. And some people said, yeah, I just really stopped blogging about my kids because they're teenagers and I can't do anything right, you know. So whatever it is, we do have to have some boundaries. I have a friend who is a first grade teacher, and she says to the parents at parent back to school night at the very beginning of the year, every year she says to them, I'll make you a deal. I won't believe the stories your kids tell about you if you don't believe the stories your kids tell about me. Right? So it is absolutely a problem that kids talk about what goes on at home. And it is not going to fly to say, you have to respect the privacy of our family. You know, if you have more than one kid, and they go to the same school, even though they're not in the same grade, you are at some point going to have the conversation that says, hey, we're talking at home about your siblings' academic struggles or this bad situation with a friend. You can't share that, right? That's somebody else's secret. You don't get to tell that. That's private. We have to be able to live that if we expect our kids to believe that it's a rule. They may or may not follow it every time. They're going to go through their own growing pains of learning about that. But we have to be able to model it. They can't be like, oh, you mean like you write about me on your blog? Pictures and video. So there is a little bit of a safety cautionary tale here, right? Things get geotagged that I didn't even think could get geotagged. There's the issue of, how many cute pictures do you want to put of your little kid up at the playground in your neighborhood that maybe has some just visual cues where somebody who lived in your city would know exactly what park that was, right? So I'm not a real paranoid person. We let our kids walk by themselves from here to there and do things like that. We're much more free-range parents, but you also don't want to hang a sign on your kid that says, vulnerable, pay attention here. Also, I'm sure everybody knows, but be really careful of the kiddie porn issue. You can't put the cute bathtub pictures on Facebook. You can't. It's against the law. Only because we don't have good laws for this yet, but it's against the law. And then lastly, there is this privacy issue for yourself, right? As a parent, you can tell some things about, even if you didn't talk specifically about your kids, when you out yourself, and a lot of people use online, whether it's social media or a blog or something, as a diary, even if you're not mentioning your children or your family, their friends' parents may read this, right? Even if you've decided, you know what, if somebody at my house of worship reads this, that's on them. Like, I just need to get this out there, right? If somebody at my husband's company reads this, they just have to cope. Well, you got to run that by your spouse, right? You got to run that by your partner or your teenage kid. If their boss reads something on Facebook because they're connected through the wonderful world of Facebook, and they read something, and that your kid walks into their job at the movie theater taking tickets, and the boss says something, and your 16-year-old is mortified, because remember, we always mortify our 16-year-olds, that's our job. But if it's something in some way that really they feel makes it a harder work environment for them, then we owe them to be a little bit more careful, right? To be transparent in our decision making about that stuff. Okay, so let's talk about something that's less, I think, confining, and that is modeling resilience. So what's resilience? It's what this little girl is doing. She is recovering from adversity. She was thirsty, and nobody got her some water fast enough, right? That is recovering from adversity, and I'm all for it. That is a problem solver. So we want our kids to be resilient, yes? But we can't just hope that they will be. Something like 8% of the population is going to have that just intuitive ability to let things roll off their back and say, wow, this is hard, I want to try it again, and just be born that way. And if they're born that way, wonderful. But if they're not born that way, we have an obligation to teach them some resilience. How do we do that? Just by being online? That's what's cool. We teach problem solving. Have you turned to social media to help you solve a problem ever? Right? I did when I was coming here, but I also had the situation, a friend of mine lost a family member, and I took a megabus to Philadelphia, not knowing how I was going to get there from there to this suburban funeral, when of course I couldn't ask anybody in her family to come pick me up. They just had this horrible loss. So I just counted on social media to help me figure out. I would find people who were in the town and city I was going to who would help me figure out how to get where I needed to be, right? And I told my kids that story when I got home that night. I was like, I'm on the megabus, and I'm tweeting and I'm Facebooking who's in Philadelphia, who knows somebody in Philadelphia, who knows public transportation really well and can get me a schedule and tell me who to, and I problem solve a lot using online resources. Well, what are our kids going to use in their lives to problem solve? Mostly online resources, right? So this is really excellent for them. There's also surviving setbacks. When you have an online work life, as we saw in the last talk, I really believe that you spend a lot of time at home considering your work life and maybe talking about your work life and maybe dealing with that initial trauma of something that goes poorly in your work life. And so your kids are going to see more that first you were really frustrated because somebody, it could be anything from a hater in your blog comments to, losing an account, right? Whatever it is. But your kids are going to see that they're going to see that whole arc of feeling like things are going well, having something happen that was really difficult, getting frustrated by it, figuring it out, and coming back to a place where things are going pretty well. And kids have to learn to survive their own setbacks. But one of the best things we can do for them is let them see that we survive setbacks. And what are some of the tools that we count upon, and what are some of the things that we do to get ourselves through. If your kids see that when you are really struggling, you say, I'm really struggling, I'm going to go for a run. Just as soon as your dad gets home, I'm going to go for a run. And when you come back, you are in a noticeably better mood, right? They say, wow, exercise, that's something I could use if I was in a bad mood. And it's not because you said, Billy, exercise is something we can use if you're in a bad mood. It's they go, I'm really frustrated. Can I go for a run? And you're going to say, well, it can only be around the backyard. But yes, you absolutely can. I think that would be great. Right? Managing the haters. Even if you don't see it as a setback, they're going to see that in the wide world of social media, you're going to make people mad. And in their social lives, online or not, as kids, they're going to make people mad. Learning that doesn't have to end you emotionally is a huge resilience skill. I don't want to lay too hard on girls, but girls have a really hard time when somebody doesn't like them. And when you ask that girl, well, do you like her? She may very well say, well, no, but I still want her to like me, right? That's not such a useful way of looking at the world. It's a much more useful way of looking at the world to say, that's feedback. Is it useful feedback? Even if I hate it, right? Even if it's hard to hear, even if it's harsh criticism, is it useful feedback, or do I think it is not useful feedback? And if it is not useful feedback, I can let it go. That's about them and not about me. Learning that when people treat you badly, it is so much more often about them than about you is a life lesson that you just have to learn through repetition. Demonstrating flexibility. This is the last point that I want to make about modeling resilience for our kids. Online life requires flexibility. You're going back and forth between different windows on your computer. You're going back and forth between different mindsets. I saw a cartoon of a woman who sits down in a business suit at a meeting and gets asked a question, and she opens up her bag, and there's another head that looks just like hers, and she says, excuse me one second, I need to take off my home head and put on my work head, right? We do that all the time. We go back and forth all the time, especially when we're working online, because it's not confined to that 9 to 5. I'm at home, and then I go to the bank, and I do banking things all day, and I finish my banking things, and I go home, and I'm only my home person at home. That doesn't really happen, right? It happens for my husband. He's an emergency medicine doctor, so when he's at work, he is at work, and we can't really bug him. And when he's at home, he can't really do his work, right? So for him, he gets to just switch. But for me, my kids see me, I'm mom, I'm doctor, I'm online, I'm mom, I'm doctor, I'm online, I'm doctor, I'm mom, it's just back and forth all the time. Demonstrating that flexibility to our kids teaches them that you're a student, oh, you're a brother, oh, you're a student, oh, you're a daughter, oh, no, you're a soccer player, you're a daughter, like that. It is really valuable to learn to make transitions well. And then lastly, I am on track to finish this last section of the day a little early, which was my goal. Teaching responsibility. So what's it mean to be reliable? To meet your obligations, right? That's what responsibility is. We want our kids to be responsible. We want them to understand and meet their obligations. These are my kids helping build something on my back porch that I'm hoping to take down later before Sandy does, actually. So how do we teach responsibility? We structure our own obligations. This does tie back into the boundaries that we talked about at the beginning, but it also is a larger issue. We've structured our own obligations with, hopefully, time for all the different pieces that we've got to do. But we say, oh, hey, I have a big project, you guys, and it's going to have to get done over this period of time. But then at the end, there's this carrot. There's us going away for the weekend together, or there's me getting to go to all of your games that weekend, or whatever it is. Right? So we structure our obligations, and we talk to our kids about that. Everything I'm going to suggest in the responsibility and in the resilience is not stuff we're not already doing. I'm just really suggesting that we're intentional about it, that we talk to our kids so that they hear that piece of it and can learn more about what we're doing. We're visibly working, right? We don't just leave and then come back and they never see us at work. One of the major advantages of having this online work is that our kids see us working. It's one of the reasons that Take Your Kid to Work Day was created, right? We take our kids to work every time they come into the kitchen. But this really teaches responsibility. We want our kids to have a good work ethic. One of the best ways they'll have a good work ethic is by watching hours. We prioritize. My eldest son, spectacularly failed his first spelling test of the year this year. I mean, really just tremendously. Came home with it kind of like this. Maybe she won't know this, right? 7 out of 15 correct. And in 5th grade at this school, that's not like an E or, that's not like an excellent or a needs work. That is an F, right? And I was like, dude, what happened? Did you not study? Did you not get the list? Did they give it to you in Swedish? What happened? And he said, well, it was a part of my language arts homework, and I did cursive for all 3 hours the night before. And I said, tell me what you mean, show me. So he shows me the packet, and sure enough, he's a methodical kid, and on top of the packet was the cursive handwriting, at the back was the spelling test. He's a lefty, they just learned cursive, and his teacher's really freaking picky about it. It took him 3 hours to write each of these words 3 times in cursive. I was like 20 words. But writing each of them 3 times in cursive, he was really focused on the cursive, not the spelling. By the time the spelling list, he kind of like glanced at it, put it away, and went to do whatever happened next. And we thought 3 hours, wow, that was a lot of homework. And didn't really look into it because he's in 5th grade and it's his responsibility, right? But we had just been at parent-teacher conference night the night before, and I had with me the packet that his language arts teacher had given us about how their grade breaks down. So I showed it to him and I said, all right, check it out. Spelling, 30% of your grade. Cursive, 5% of your grade. And he was like, what are you telling me? Like, what does this mean? And I said, what this means is that you should put 30% of your time in language arts into spelling, 5% into cursive. And he said, but I had to have it done. I had to show her that I'd done every word 3 times. Whereas the spelling list, I just had to sit down and take the spelling test, right? He was all wrapped up in this idea that it wouldn't be finished. The way he did it, it was finished. And I said, yeah, that's true. You would have had to put up with saying, no, Ms. Hawk, I didn't finish it. But your grade would be like a B instead of an F, right? And so learning that prioritizing, and he was like, well, but, and I said, no, it happens to me too. It's embarrassing to me to not have a blog post on my site 3 times a week because I kind of committed to that in my mind and my readers have had that, so maybe they rely on it. But the truth is, I would rather put up a post that said, I'd rather put up 2 that week and meet these obligations over here because they pay me something or they're necessary for other people as well, and live with the humiliation, maybe there's a little bit of shame, in not meeting my obligations on my blog because, oh, what will people think? But I've got to prioritize, right? And so we just got to talk to our kids about prioritizing for them to realize it's something they can even choose to do. Because up until the middle of elementary school, you just do what the teacher says. There is no juggling it in your head. It's not until you're changing, not until you have different classes with different teachers for different subjects that you have even the option of prioritizing. And then the last thing about teaching responsibility, and this is not just about work responsibility, this is about hygiene, this is about sports practice, this is about community service. Responsibility means keeping promises, right? It means structuring your obligations so that you don't make too many promises, but keeping them once you've made them. So when we create all these boundaries, and when we say we're only going to do these things at these times, or if I've created that boundary, I've said these are my office hours, but then something comes up. I get a call from school that my child's sick. I may pay myself that time back later. I may say, hey, you remember those 2 hours I took with you yesterday afternoon because you came home early from school because you were sick and we made chicken soup and we sat on the couch together and whatever. I'm going to have to work tonight to pay that time back, right? We have that flexibility again that we're modeling, but we keep our promises, right? I keep my promise that I'm your mom, and if you're sick at school and I can pick you up, I will. But I also keep my promise that I need to do this many hours of work per week, if I can. But we have to be careful when we model this online life for our kids because we may reap what we sow. Well, yes, we could read your blog, or you could just tell us about your school day. This is the infomercial. I am, as I mentioned, a family doctor, but I did start AskDrG.com. I created a page just for the people who are at Podcamp or live streaming. If you want to go to this link, which is my website /join/, you'll see an opportunity to give me your email address and then click on Podcamp attendees. And I have a bunch of free tools there. One is boundaries for working from home. So it's suggestions about the whens and the wheres and the whats. And also a guide for chores with kids, which really teaches a lot of responsibility, getting kids involved in community service, and also a tech contract for kids who are probably about age 10 and up about using technology but not abusing technology. Thanks very much. Do you guys have any questions? I blast here.
I just comment that
Sure.
you mentioned all the people who read your blog. You mentioned neighbors and friends and family, teachers. There's kids, teachers also read your blog.
Oh yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's interesting, I wonder too if they would more so want to read the blogs of their students' parents or less so.
In my experience, less so, but they are compelled to do so.
Happen upon it in any event. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks you guys. It's nice to get sprung a little earlier.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
It was very good.